Welcome to the Dakota Live podcast. I'm your host, Robert Morier. The goal of this podcast is to help you better know the people behind investment decisions. We introduce you to chief investment officers, manager research professionals, investment consultants, and students who will help you sell in between the lines and better understand the investment sales ecosystem. If you're not familiar with Dakota and their Dakota Live content, please check out our website at dakota.com. Before we get started, I need to read a brief disclosure. This content is provided for informational purposes and should not be relied upon as recommendations or advice about investing in securities. All investments involve risk and may lose money. Dakota does not guarantee the accuracy of any of the information provided by the speaker who is not affiliated with Dakota. Not a solicitation, testimonial, or an endorsement by Dakota or its affiliates. Nothing herein is intended to indicate approval, support, or recommendation of the investment advisor or its supervised persons by Dakota. Today's episode is brought to you by Dakota Marketplace. Are you tired of constantly jumping between multiple databases and channels to find the right investment opportunities? Introducing Dakota Marketplace, the comprehensive institutional and intermediary database built by fundraisers for fundraisers. With Dakota Marketplace, you'll have access to all channels and asset classes in one place, saving you time and streamlining your fundraising process. Say goodbye to the frustration of searching through multiple databases and say hello to a seamless and efficient fundraising experience. Sign up now and see the difference Dakota Marketplace can make for you. Visit dakotamarketplace.com today. Meet the Brooklyn Youth Charitable Investment Group, BYCIG, a student-led initiative proving that finance and philanthropy can go hand in hand, even in high school. Co-founders Jasper, Gould, and Emile, Chilingirian, both sophomores at the Berkeley Carroll School, built BYCIG from the ground up, leveraging self-taught financial literacy to manage a growing investment fund that channels returns into charitable giving. With a portfolio balancing equities and fixed income, a disciplined investment process, and a macro view on rates and markets, BYCIG is more than just a club, it's a movement. In this episode, we explore how young investors are making real financial decisions, shaping philanthropic impact, and learning lessons that even seasoned professionals can appreciate. This is a conversation about financial literacy, entrepreneurial thinking, and proving that age is no barrier to making an impact. Well, I am very excited to introduce two special guests today to the Dakota Live podcast, Emile and Jasper. Thank you for coming down from Brooklyn to Philadelphia. It's great to meet you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, this is really great for us too. As our audience knows, I'm also a professor at Drexel University. I teach venture capital, venture investing, early stage analysis, but it's all predicated around entrepreneurship with a thought on impact and giving as well. So this is great for me to be able to meet two high school students who are in the midst of doing something very unique. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
We'd love to hear the inspiration behind the organization BYCIG.
Initially, it was an idea. I think many high schoolers understand starting a club. It's a common thing for someone to do. It's an interesting extracurricular opportunity for a lot of different types of high schoolers. And we were interested in finance and investment, and we thought we would start a finance and investment club. There was a lot of interest from our peers. And so we took it to the school. We spoke to some parents and our friends, but there was this one, I would say, element to our idea that seemed more difficult than all the other parts, which was we wanted to manage real money. I think the reason for that, well, there was a variety of them, but we felt that people would only really truly learn and experience it authentically if there was real money involved and real stakes. And that was difficult. When we went to the school and we said, here's our idea, high schoolers managing a couple $1,000s for charity, it was a resounding no for a variety of obvious reasons. But we made it happen because we worked outside of our school and we worked within our community, and we kind of expanded beyond just the idea of a club and built it into a large organization. And now we are kind of happy to see that we have created something, despite the fact that I think it was received with some difficulty. And then Emile, you can talk a little bit more about what we're trying to do.
So in a more conceptual sense, I think the BYCIG is trying to engage our peers and engage students to learn about finance and engage with finance in a real hands-on way. And I think there's this narrative and there's this unspoken idea that surrounds our generation, which is that it's weird to care. And the BYCIG is completely disagrees with that. And the BYCIG is giving students, tangible opportunities rather than just theoretical expertise. We're giving them chances to speak with professors, converse with professionals, land them internship opportunities. Most importantly, getting real world experience of how to work in a professional setting. And that's some of the inspiration behind the BYCIG.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think, Emile and I, we have a lot of peers who, going into 10th grade, I've always been dead set on all the schools I really want to go to, and I know what I want to do in my high school, college career, and beyond. But I think that's not the case for everyone, and it's not the case for a lot of my friends, at least prior to the starting of our organization. And then there are a lot of kids who are more like me in the sense that they know exactly what they want to do, and they're trying to fill up their resume with as many extracurriculars when they apply to college. But the problem is that there's this wide variety of extracurriculars that aren't really doing a lot, or they're not getting a lot out of it. It's just a resume item. And we wanted to find a way to bridge the gap between those two types of high schoolers and create an environment that kind of accepts both of them and provides opportunity for both of them. And it's not just something to put on a resume. It's something that's actually changing them and the world around them.
That's great. I love the practical experience. I like the experiential approach. It's what you're seeing more and more in university classrooms, as well as high school classrooms as well, bringing the case study to life. So in this case, for managing tangible assets.
Yeah.
It's also interesting. I think a lot of our listeners, it'll resonate with them even further on in their careers. If they're starting an asset management business and they're looking to raise money from institutional investors, a lot of the time they'll have a portfolio, but it'll be a paper portfolio.
Right.
And no one will look at them until they have some money in it.
Right.
So it's a very interesting exercise that you went through earlier than most people face in their careers in finance.
I will add, just because it's funny you bring that up, we had a paper portfolio as well, and we kind of faced the problem where people were like, yeah, we'll give money when you show some gains, when you show what you've done. And the concern is when everyone says that, you can't show the gains because you can't get the money in the first place.
Yeah,
so,
I have some bad news. It never ends. That's the same answer you're going to get many years from now, but it's good experience that you got it so early. What was that process like? What were those conversations like? Jasper, your dad's here today. In full disclosure, he's not on camera. But when you sit down with your parents and you're telling them that you're going to manage a portfolio of real assets, there's a goal behind it. But what was that conversation like?
I mean, I think everyone was a little, I wouldn't say concerned, but just everyone was being careful because we live in a community where everyone. People know each other, and when we all respect each other, and there would have been a concern if we did this the wrong way, that it could have reflected badly on us, on our school, on our families, on our friends. And so that's why we were being advised with a lot of diligence and care. But once we started to work through the logistics, I mean, like you said, my dad, and your parents and a lot of other adult advisors that we've had, they've kind of guided us through various different iterations of what the idea really was. If we had listened to the advice from adults that we had initially gotten, it would have never become what it was today because it just to them, it didn't seem feasible, but we made it happen kind of through just sheer pushing it forward, regardless of what we were hearing from other people.
That's also a very good lesson in startups. You'll hear a lot of no's, but if you believe in what you're doing, continue on it. And I'm glad you guys did. So it's great to hear that. What other challenges did you face when you think about, bringing this to life? Besides having the tangible portfolio, some of those early discussions around, in the industry, we would call that fiduciary responsibility, which means somebody else is giving you money and that you have to manage that money in a way that's going to uphold their expectations. You're not going to do anything risky or unethical.
I would say, kind of building off Jasper's point, like it's hard at our age for adults to take us completely seriously when we talk about, managing portfolio with real money. So I think it was definitely a struggle trying to convince these parents that, we are teenagers that will take this completely seriously. And we would make, disciplined, informed decisions. And it took a while to convince parents through persistence. We, writing insights, writing many papers on, different topics that interest us in finance. Like through this work, we kind of convinced these parents that, we're doing real work here and it's serious and it's not just something to brush aside, right?
Yeah, and I would add, because I was happy to see that in your brief introduction, you said it's not just a club, it's a movement. And I appreciated that because two words that I think are often used, not always to our face, but surrounding our organization, especially in its early stages, was cute and club. And those two just, I think, tick us off a little bit because it's like, club is acceptable because sometimes that's just a confusion. But the cute, it's not cute only because we're high schoolers. We are really trying to do something here. And, I appreciate when people find things cute and they appreciate what we're doing, but it's hard to raise money from people and really get people seriously involved when they are writing it off as a gimmick, and that's not what it is. So that's definitely been a big challenge, is really getting people to take us seriously. And kind of as Emile said, the way we get through that is just relationships take a little bit longer for us to build because there's not that built-in trust and respect that I think often would come with a professional relationship.
For the audience, could you take a step back? Tell us a little bit about BYCIG. So what is the organization? What's the mission of the group? And what are you doing day to day?
Essentially what we're doing, it stands for the Brooklyn Youth Charitable Investment Group, though it's no longer just Brooklyn, it's actually around the country now. And what we're doing is we're creating an environment and an organization that provides educational resources through online courses and content for high schoolers specifically to learn not just financial literacy bare minimum skills, but also the skills that put them on the career path towards potentially working in finance one day. And what we also emphasize is that these aren't just skills that you would get tested on in a class, they're skills that you can actually apply. And that's not a hypothetical, that's actually a practical opportunity, because we give all of our members a chance to help manage our fund, which is operated for charitable purposes. And, we have members proposing equities. I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but we have members proposing equities, every week, coming up with new ideas, using the skills they learn to really contribute to the portfolio. And then, we also have a marketing department and a fundraising department. So there's a variety of ways that people are getting, seriously professional experience in an environment that isn't, I think, toxic or difficult, because they're among peers and they're all kind of growing together.
I just want to emphasize the point about the fundraising, the marketing, and the investing. So at the BYCIG, we have 3 different departments that each bring value in different ways. So our fundraising department works on, gaining professional relationships and, talking with professors and obviously raising funds for our organization. Then our marketing team, they run the social media, they create social media posts, they do outreach to, different communities. And then our investment team, which, is tasked with writing equity proposals and managing the fund more directly.
How about the outreach to other schools? So I think that's great that you're looking outside of Brooklyn, you're targeting other high schools to, kind of increase that education as it relates to, more than literacy. I think that's great. But what does that outreach look like? What types of schools are you targeting? How do you make that first call or send that first email?
I would say maybe 3-4 months ago, Emile and I and a couple other people on our team, Jack Lickman, one of our VPs, what we were doing really is writing incessant emails to every high school we could saying, can you guys bring this up at an assembly at some point? Can your community engagement person talk about it? And we didn't get a ton of replies. And then we decided we were going to create a social media presence and actually have kids work on creating engaging social media content that kind of follows this brand that we have now. And that worked so much better than anything else we had done prior. I mean, we had people from Westchester, from New Jersey, because at the time we were only in Brooklyn, just reaching out, expressing interest, and so many people were interested. And that was really incredible for us to see. And I would just say, and really to any high schooler or college student or even adult who wants to start something and get people involved in something, the way that networks and social communities on social media kind of overlap and intertwine has shown, at least proved to be for us, incredibly valuable, because there's this way that just because of one mutual friend, you have this whole new geography in Westchester, and then they tell their friends. And, it's the same way the West Coast started. Someone emailed us and they said, I saw your Instagram post. I'm really interested. I want to help start something in the West Coast. And now we have a thriving group of kids there, and it's growing. And it's very fluid, and that's really what we are looking for. And it's been incredibly effective.
We have a lot of listeners who I suspect would want to know specifically what your social media strategy was. Financial services has been a little bit later to the game in social media than other industries, mainly because of the regulatory environment. That's starting to change now a little bit. You see it on LinkedIn. We see it now a little bit more on Instagram. So was there any specific type of social media content that you guys put together? Anything, that went viral, that really kind of hit it off?
2 of the big things really are making sure everything is explained clearly. And we've had a lot of those posts that are like pinned posts, you could call them, because they're just explaining what we're doing. And then another thing is, kind of like shocking big graphics that really grab you. I mean, I think our first post had this big bowl, right in the front of it with the horns, and it had our name on top of it. And I think that was very engaging, especially when a bunch of teenagers see their friends reposting this bowl and they're like, what is that? And, now they know. And then another thing, especially on TikTok and on Reels, what's been working is essentially short form educational content that is exciting. So here are these career paths, or, I think our latest post was Warren Buffett started investing at 12, Steve Cohen at 15. And, this is how, when they started, why should you wait? And then it's like a little bit of information, or career paths maybe on Wall Street. It's just somewhat educational stuff that engages people and makes them feel like they're learning something. And if you want to add.
I would say what really helped us social media wise was really grabbing the attention of the user. So first, we asked everybody part of the organization and anybody we knew to repost the Instagram, which definitely helped drive traffic towards the organization. We stayed consistent with, the fonts we used, the colors we used.
So some branding there?
Yeah, exactly. Some branding. And, we made sure to plaster our logo everywhere we could. And I think, that helped.
And also shout out to Canva for anyone who's trying to work on a social media campaign. I mean, it was an incredibly valuable tool. I think we're still operating on the free membership, and we've got like 20 people using it, and it's completely effective and it works great. So these things are at your disposal if you really look for them. I think people think it's harder than it actually is.
Yeah, I think they do. I think it seems a little overwhelming for lots of reasons. I also think there's this aspect to social media that people also wrestle with when they're not working. Even when they are working, they kind of want to get off it. But then you recognize it's really important, to building the brand. So. Right. But it sounds like really effective ways to do it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
we appreciate it. So the investment strategy. So how do members pitch investment ideas? And this is a question you would get if you were managing institutional money. Who has the ultimate decision?
For investment strategy, we have, like I said, our investment department that is tasked with writing equity proposals every 2 to 3 weeks. And they write these equity proposals based on the vast amount of resources that we give them. We give them, model investment proposals. They're usually about 4 to 5 pages long with, rigorous research on business strategy, key growth drivers, risks, and much more. And they find a time to speak with our investment advisory committee, which is made up of around 6 founding members, as well as 1 adjunct investment advisor. Which usually comes in the form of like someone who works in the field, a professor. They sit in, we talk ideas, we discuss. It's very constructive. Then we vote democratically on if it's a yay or a nay for the investment decision.
So it's majority?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Majority.
And then I would just add, because Emile and I, and this is kind of the second part of your question, we were actually thinking about the answer to this question just yesterday. And we kind of realized that there is this narrative, in private equity and hedge funds of like the analyst goes to the investment committee and it's intimidating and it's antagonistic and they're trying to criticize the idea and it seems like it's a fight between the two parties, but it is not that way here. I mean, we are students. The person proposing the idea is students, and the only person that's not a student is whoever the adjunct expert is. So they have, all the leverage in this situation because they're the one that knows how to properly critique the ideas. But otherwise, it's just a conversation about whether it aligns with our interests. And then, as you said, it's just majority rule. Everyone has an equal vote, every time an expert comes in. I mean, you could be an expert. Anyone could be an expert if they're interested. They just sit in and they're granted a vote as well. And that's how decisions are made. Yeah.
That's smart. It makes a lot of sense as I'm thinking about all of the investment committees I've sat on in my career. What happens more often than not is that analyst has a lot of confirmation bias because they've spent so much time studying that company. So they're only going to go in with a buy, and they kind of lose the perspective of, of the bear case. Right. What happens if it doesn't work? So I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely the idea is, I mean, sometimes we'll ask like, is this your first thing you've researched? Because I mean, for myself, because I do occasional proposals as well, just because I find it interesting. And I'll research one and I really like it. And then I realize maybe it's not the best, and it sucks because you really want that first one to be the one, so you don't have to keep doing it. But you can't just take the first one and run with it. You have to make sure it actually fits what you're looking for.
And where are the students sourcing the data from? So if there's a company that they're interested in, is it just online, or do you subscribe to a database that you can utilize?
Yeah, it's online. I think it's really, there is somewhat of a fortress around financial data, generally speaking. And we're always looking for arrangements if anyone wants to help us get some access. But
I hope this helps.
We don't have Bloomberg terminal access yet. Maybe one day. But there are tools kind of like Canva that are just so accessible. Like, FinViz is great. Yahoo Finance is great. I mean, we have people who read Yahoo Finance news every day, and that's like, they know what's going on. They are in the pulse, tapping the pulse. So yeah, open source stuff.
And it's not just equities. You've got some fixed income in the portfolio?
Our portfolio breakdown is 60% equities, 40% fixed income, because we planned our fixed income to be the actual gains that are going to charities, because we think that fixed income provides a more consistent basis.
Say you're a potential donor and we're speaking to you about how the portfolio works. One thing we often lead with is like, bar the US government defaulting on its debt or, Apple disappearing. We're going to donate to charity. That's going to happen. That is something I can guarantee you, even if it's the worst bear market you've ever seen. And we can't tell you what's going to happen with markets. We can't tell you with any really certainty what's going to happen with the equities, but we can tell you that we are going to continue to donate and testify to our commitment to the cause, and that the cash isn't just going to be locked up in an irretrievable box. Like, it's always going to be flowing out, going to charities. So that's a reason there.
And the fund is evergreen, so all of the profits, all the returns go back to the fund?
Yeah, for the equities, yes. Well, actually, yes. Generally, unless it's going out to charity, everything else it remains within.
I gotcha. And how about just thinking about the current market or the current portfolio without naming specific securities? Are there any sectors or industries that the group is particularly interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting time for us to be coming of age financially, because there's a lot of stuff going on macroeconomically. That's definitely something I'm definitely very interested in. So we have a lot of theses there, but I would say on a sector and geography level, that's a tough question. I think first and foremost, I would admit, and Emile would probably agree with me here, that probably more than 50% of sectors, we don't actually understand the underlying business models incredibly well. I don't think anyone does. I mean, AI, like, it's hard I couldn't tell you a lot of the differentiators between AI products out there. That's a tough thing to do. But some things we do know, and we wrote these into our annual outlook for 2025 in January. We are looking towards, some increased deal flow for financial sector. I think that's something that will come after the first 100 days, since we've seen other things drowning that out a little bit. There's both a bull and a bear case to be made for home builders. And I think it's more about the individual companies rather than the sector as a whole. I think, as of the past week, there's a lot of buzz about European arms businesses. That's definitely something we're looking at.
So you have non-US equity positions?
Yes, we do. We 100% are tolerating non-US positions. Of course, the US is definitely our focus, but just in terms of screener terms, we're never going to use US only as a criteria, because of course, we're going to be careful concerning what countries we get involved in. But even, China and Japan, there are definitely businesses there that we are interested in and we might hold positions in. I personally believe that countries like India and Nigeria, with such rapidly growing populations, inevitably they must become economic superpowers. I think Rishi Sunak, when he was prime minister, said that India already was an economic superpower. So that's definitely a place for us to look. And it feels a little bit untapped by Wall Street right now, unusually. And that's definitely something in our lifetime that I think we're going to see play out, is a lot more economic superpowers than there is right now and than there was in the past. And that's something we get to, I think, ride a little bit.
I appreciate that. Are there any guidelines on the portfolio? So is there only so much that you can invest in a specific security or sector or industry? How do you think about risk management?
We do have that fixed income holding up a lot of the capital. A lot of the risk management is discretionary, because given that it is logistically and practically difficult to have everybody proposing ideas have holistic understanding of what's going on in the portfolio. I think for the most part, the people on the board will discuss risk management concepts when we're discussing an idea following the proposals. We don't want to be too concentrated in one sector or necessarily one geography. I think we recently passed an idea that was non-US because we were thinking there would be a benefit of having uncorrelated gain and, diversified risk. So that's something we think about, but I wouldn't say there are any codified policies.
So how about the philanthropic model? How do you decide which charities receive funding?
We take the charitable aspect at the BYCIG extremely seriously, which is why we have a charity board, which is comprised of a head of charity, which is a teenage member at our organization, as well as parent advisors who work in the nonprofit sector in the charitable industry. These people have lots of experience with donating distributed funds. We make sure that, they're serious about this being part of the charitable board. for example, one of our members is an evaluation specialist at the UN Women, while another one works at the Lucille Packard Foundation. So, you know, we have all these people with different experiences in the nonprofit sector, which, you know, help us make educated decisions on where our funds are distributed.
And it's all about, when it comes to where we're donating, it's all about extending our mission beyond, you know, our means, because oftentimes it is really difficult for us to tap certain regions and solve certain like systemic issues ourselves. So we want to make sure that we are backing that up with our donations. And it's also not just writing a check. We want to build relationships with the charities so that we can have a connection and understand where the money is going. So, and, you know, maybe down the line, we are thinking about working with events with some of our charities to kind of like collaborate on solving problems.
Is the organization set up as a 501c3 or?
Right now we are not, but that is the long-term plan. The current structure is it is an LLC, but it is an LLC with an operating agreement that clearly states that we are in, you know, abiding by all the things I just said. And those are openly accessible documents to all of our donors. And we have disclosures that we disseminate every time there's any discussion of donation. And those things are made very clear. I think we have that document, the disclosure kind of serves as a protection mechanism against any concern of us not doing as we say. And then I would also say that down the line, that is the hope. And, you know, it's a really difficult thing to do, we found, and that is something we are working on. Part of the reason why we do the charitable donations twice a year, and we do that because we want to, you know, testify to exactly what we were just saying and to testify to the mission, despite the fact that the IRS doesn't yet verify that.
That makes sense. When it comes to impact and making donations, I would suspect what you will be asked, you probably already are being asked, is what kind of impact are you making? So what do those outcomes look like? So if I were to donate to your organization and you're making donations to these charitable organizations on our behalf, how are you measuring those outcomes?
Yeah, two ways that donations make an impact. The first is as it follows through our organization, which is somewhat of a conduit. And the way I like to define that is with a story, because I've had this conversation a few times, and it's just, for some reason, this story is profound to me. We were on a meeting discussing a potential investment with the investment board and someone proposing it. And, you know, I won't name names because keep our top secret portfolio, but essentially we were discussing one company, and then I was in the middle of saying, you know, I read in earnings this morning that maybe shows some macroeconomic moves that might be beneficial to this company we were discussing. But I got interrupted by my friend of like 2 years who, you know, 6 months ago, I would have never thought that he would have been reading a quarterly earnings report, is all I will say. And he interrupted me, and he read it already, you know, it come out less than an hour ago, and he knew exactly what I was going to say, and he said it even better than I would have. And it was just kind of like, that's what we're doing, is we are creating truly interested and people that are tapped into financial news and markets in a way that I think it would have been really difficult to do otherwise. And I would have been surprised to see that happen if it weren't for this organization. And that's the first impact. And then the second impact is really that of our charities. And then, I mean, we would have to, you know, those are discussions that we are still having because we haven't done our first contribution. But the hope is that long-term, another impact is making education accessible. And that's a big part of why our platform is entirely online. We make it such that anyone from anywhere can join. I mean, we have an apply form essentially that like gets people registered. And the other day, someone sent me a photo who works with that form that, you know, they put their location as India. And we were like, okay, well, you know, that's something. I mean, we don't have an organization there chapter yet, but it does just show that it's so accessible for everyone. And that it's really just like, if you want to, you can get involved. And that's, you know, that's another impact, is that we were making every educational course. I mean, everything's free, nothing's password protected.
No, that's great. I mean, I'm sure you may be doing this already, but something to think about is you have this growing group of members. And one thing that tends to happen early on is that you actually lose track of members as they graduate high school, they go on to different things. But if you can keep track of them, where did they go to school? What did they study? What did they do after graduating in terms of that first job? And then you might be able to, you know, create some tracks and stuff so you can demonstrate.
Oh yeah, we have high hopes for all of them.
Yeah, that's great. I love that I'm asking two sophomores in high school what the succession plan is. But what's the succession plan? I mean, you only have 2.5 years left of school. A big question that comes out of the university, particularly at Drexel, we're at the School of Entrepreneurship. We have an incubator. We have these companies that grow and build out over 4 years. But the number one question from outside looking in is what happens after 4 years? What happens after you guys graduate? What does the next cohort look like? And how do you ensure that the donors see that cohort coming to fruition?
Well, I would say, this organization is open to any high schooler. So something we've been doing recently is looking for younger audiences to start joining the organization because we want to make the BYCIG a lasting institution. Whenever we talk to any donor, we articulate our goals of becoming a lasting institution. Recently, we've been, trying to make a course for middle schoolers, which is another idea we've had to, expand even more and get even younger audiences.
The two things I would say are, number one, focusing on making sure we have younger members who are being prepared and really learning to, fill the leadership roles. And I will say we have plenty already. I mean, it's like an interesting thing I found actually is on our meetings, oftentimes no one knows who's in senior year and no one knows who's a freshman because everyone just kind of comes into it with the same level of understanding and they're all at the same point, or maybe not, but they all treat each other with the same respect. So one day, maybe towards the end of our junior year, Emile and I will have to have that conversation, but there's a wealth of good options. Emile and I hope that we continue to live on, and this does too. We go to Berkeley Carroll, which is a very old, I think more than a century old school in Brooklyn. And we're surrounded by a lot of these institutions, Brooklyn Tech, Bronx Science, St. Anne's, Packer, Trinity, all of these schools in New York City that have really stood the test of time and have continued to influence kids and change people's lives for so long. And our hope is that, we don't want to make a high school, but we want to make an extracurricular, essentially, an organization that can stand the test of time and can continue to move and be dynamic with the new generations of members. Because right now what we're doing is we've created something for Gen Z, but what we want to do down the line is, I don't know what they call the next generation alpha, I guess, but the next step is something for Gen Alpha, and that's something someone from that generation will figure out.
It sounds like you've got this great pool of institutions right in your backyard in Brooklyn. When you think about the independent schools versus public schools, have you tapped into any of those other institutions in the area and kind of thinking about improving that education and that pipeline for finance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of it is what we often say is that, there's a huge wall around Wall Street. And we want to help people just get through that. And Emile and I are both very fortunate to come from, I would say, a place of privilege. But we want to make sure that that's not a determinant in anyone's trajectory at our organization or in their life. So what we have been doing is thinking about, as you said, reaching out to public schools as well, and also reaching out to, another thing we've been doing is we reach out to people who follow us on the Instagram. We say are you interested? And oftentimes they say yes. And that is, I think, non-discriminating because that is at their own initiative they follow, and at our initiative, they will be reached out to. We are speaking with someone actually, I think next week, I believe it is, who has experience in that area and really cares about that issue. And we are definitely developing a long-term plan for how we can really target underprivileged communities and people, because that is the mission and that is where the money goes when we make donations, and we want to reflect that in our organization.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But you have to raise money. So what's the fundraising process look like? What do those calls usually sound like from your perspective? And what lessons have you learned from having to ask someone for money?
I think me and Jasper have learned the ins and outs of fundraising throughout our time at the BYCIG because we've had to learn fundraising since the inception. I think something we've learned is that, it's not only important to put yourself out there, but persistency is a huge factor when it comes to fundraising. Whether it's talking on Zoom with a professor or scouring LinkedIn for professional contacts, you have to stay persistent. You have to keep messaging them, even though it may feel like you're bugging them.
We have someone, BYCIG, who's a senior. She's older than us. She goes to our school and she's the head of fundraising. So she helps that team. And she did LLS, which is another fundraising thing a lot of high schoolers do. And she's taught them a lot of valuable lessons. I think her biggest one that she always emphasizes is just like be outgoing, be personable, continue to talk to them, make a personal connection, not just a professional connection. And then something I always say is that, because I've felt this way a lot of times, when you're sending the fourth or fifth email, it feels like you're being annoying or you're just bugging them, and that doesn't feel great. But I actually I like to flip that narrative and just make it more that you are helping them, because oftentimes things get lost and people are busy. And if they said they're interested, they probably are interested. And that by continuing to be persistent, you are helping actualize their interest. And that, there are two answers in fundraising. It's yes or no. If they say next week, then they're just deferring the yes or no for a week, and you just have to, you shouldn't be, if they say, I'll get back to you, you should be getting back to them in a week, it's persistence with respect, and then respecting their answer once they make it, but pushing them towards one rather than the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody taught me early in my career that good news travels fast.
Yeah.
So sometimes if you don't get it right away, it may be a no, but that's okay.
Right.
Just move on and go for the next one. That's great advice. Thank you so much. How about some more advice for people, or I should say students your age in high school that are thinking about starting something either similar or just anything? It seems like more than anything, starting something is what we all want to do, whether you're my age or your age.
Yeah. So
what's the advice you give someone when they want to start something?
Well, I would say to just join the BYCIG.
There you go. You might be your best salesperson.
Right.
But on a more serious note, I would tell them to just go for it. I feel like, there's a lot of reluctancy to, start something in our generation because, people may think, or students may think they're too inexperienced, or, they're waiting for somebody to tell them to start something. But the truth is that the opportunities aren't going to be given to you. You have to take initiative. You have to start. Send a couple hundred emails. You have to get used to rejection. Start your website, even though it may not be perfect. Get your first check, even though it may be small. Build your support network, even though it may just be a few people.
I would just emphasize what he said about how people are really reluctant to get started with something, and it manifests to our teachers and to our parents like our generation doesn't care, but that's definitely not true. I mean, Gen Z has opinions, Gen Z has ambitions, they want to change things. It's just intimidating to have like a whole big world and you just feel like a kid. And then I would say what he said, just get started. Like the hardest part of going to school is getting out of bed, but once you're past that, you're pretty much good from there. So you just got to get started.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. I as you were saying that, giving your answer, I was thinking, what's a misperception that people older have of your generation?
I would say that's a big one, that we don't care. I would say we have we've had a lot of things thrust upon us that are not typical, social media, we have all of that. And it's very easy for adults to write the entire generation off as just the social media generation and, we're just a lost cause. And I do think what we've seen, we were just talking about how social media can be really productive, and a lot of other things can be productive too. The way we think about things, even in our investment team discussions, are definitely young perspectives. They're new ways of thinking about things, new products. We are young consumers, and that's a perspective that, people on Wall Street don't oftentimes have. I think inherently there's already an edge by having like this perspective of a high schooler that no other fund really has high school outlook. So, we get a lot of people coming in saying things about like clothing brands or food brands, and it's like, it might not seem like the most educated financial discourse, but it actually is, because it's the micro level. What do you think of this? And you can kind of expand that more generally to the entire generation. We care about things. We want to do things, it's just difficult, but I think we're on track to get a little bit more caring as a generation, generally speaking. People are starting to pick up, and that's a big thing about what we're doing. It's a little bit comforting to see that we shouldn't fear for our generation, because it's like, okay, once you get them going, they're going to be into it. Once you get them going, they do have it in them to care and to get things done. And it's just, as Emile said in the start, there is this idea that it's weird to care. But once you just get past that, you're good. I mean, we have plenty of potential and plenty of skills that other people don't have, you know?
Well, I think you're both on the right track.
Thank
so
you.
outside of financial services and money management, what do you like to do outside of school?
I like to play soccer.
Yeah, we both play for BKU. It's a travel soccer team in Brooklyn. I don't know. I'm a big reader.
I speak a few languages.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. How about a book recommendation for the audience?
Oof. Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger.
That's a great one.
That's the number one for me.
Okay, that's a good one. How about you? Are you a reader as well?
Not so avid as Jasper, but
How about your languages?
my mother is Argentinian, so I speak Spanish fluently. And I speak French as well, and I speak a little bit of Armenian as well.
I don't speak that many.
That's okay.
I speak Latin.
That's
Not as
okay
helpful.
too. The classics are always important as well.
I read the books with it, yeah.
especially if you're reading fiction. Thank you both so much for
Yeah,
being here.
thank
This
you
has
so
been
much.
a really interesting conversation. We appreciate you coming down to Philadelphia, coming to our studios from New York. We appreciate your dad making the drive as well. So we'll thank him afterwards. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you
It's
so
been
much.
great.
If you want to learn more about the Brooklyn Youth Charitable Investment Group, please check out their website at www.brooklynyouthcharitableInvestmentGroup.com. You can find this episode and past episodes on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. We're also available on YouTube if you prefer to watch while you listen. If you'd like to catch up on past episodes, check out our website at Dakota.com. And finally, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, please be sure to follow, like, share these episodes. We appreciate your feedback as well. Jasper, Emile, thank you both for being here. And to our audience, thank you for investing your time with Dakota.
Don't say goodbye.